excited today to lead the whole room, really, in a discussion about RTN standards, what we've created so far. We're previewing a really cool new tool. You're among the first to see it today. And in addition to that, we're going to have a little workshop after we have the panel discussion and get into like roundtables and talk about how we can bring this to the next level, the work that you see on stage today. So welcome my panelists. You can see them here. Oh, we didn't line up exactly, but we're good enough. So thank you all for joining us. I want to just say a welcome to another Chipotle fan and enterprise architect to Russell Cotter. Thank you for joining me. Thank you. Stephen Elinson with AWS. We've got Robert Peterson with Oracle, Courtney Radke with Fortinet, and last but not least over there is Tang with Hughes. So welcome everybody to the stage and thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So I think we want to start off the conversation with just talking about standards. There's been a lot of mention about standards from stage so far, which is exciting. Robert, I want to start with you. So about, what was it, 4 years, in 2019,
yes.
We were all together at MURTEC, and we were in Vegas, as MURTEC always is in the spring, and it was the launch of the Restaurant Technology Network. And we had a session where we packed a room with restaurant operators and suppliers. I think there were almost 200 people in that room. It was a big room. And we talked about what does the industry want most and the pain points and the challenges that you have. And just tell us a little bit, Robert, about that discussion, what you took from that, and where we are today, how far we've come.
So the number one and the number two things that were asked for, one was integrations to third-party delivery, and the other one was just integrations in general. And today, in hindsight, that's just integrations being open as an industry to adopt a data standard. First having to build it, to define it, and then having to build it. You know, we had a lunch earlier for the RTN group, and I stood up and introduced myself as I was there day one. And I did start as just a volunteer, just wanting to help out, and I quickly recognized how powerful this movement was going to be, and I somehow worked myself into a leadership role and a spokesperson role. It's been a passion of mine for the last 4 years, and it was so important to our industry. We've now built that, and we announced that last month. And I ask of all of you is we need to move now towards adoption. And this is critical. This is really important. Even listening to some of the panels earlier, still talking about the struggles of integrations, and those should be configurations and not integrations.
Yeah, and I'm going to say that like Robert's being very modest. He's been in every single one of our what we call work groups. They're like think tanks where we all get together and we tackle problems. I think you've been in every single one of them, from the API framework all the way through to the standards you see on the screen there. He's a self-professed data geek, and we are grateful to have all of these folks support and generous time, valuable time and talent, technology talent, just in the trenches with us creating these standards. So as you see here on the screen, we have released 4 standards to date, and today we will be announcing a framework, which is not so much a standard, but really an enterprise architecture tool for moving your organization into more of a streamlined operation. So with that, I think we're going to look at the framework really quickly. This is the tool I kind of alluded to earlier that is just a teaser tool, but as you can see here, the key contributors on the left-hand side of the screen, the Restaurant Technology Capabilities Framework is what we're calling it. And so to start that conversation, let's turn to Russell with Chipotle and tell us, Russell, how did you find it and how are you using it?
Thanks, Angela, and thanks for being here today. So I guess my entry into the framework was very self-serving. I took a position with Chipotle coming out of banking and other industries, not having had any restaurant exposure, and I thought I need to know what restaurants do. What is it that restaurants do? So I went as an architect looking for the capability framework for the restaurant industry, knowing that telecom had one, banking had one, surely restaurants had one. Turns out that wasn't true. So I furthered my search and I found RTN, and I thought, these guys have got a working group for the framework. Let me jump onto that. So it was about a Friday I got into the working group, and I learned that the working group was coming to the closure, the near end of developing this framework. I got on the call, And they said, well, so I introduced myself, how long have you been in the industry? I said, -1 day. So I started Chipotle next Monday. But my interest in the framework is to know that it will help me personally, kind of like part of my onboarding into the industry, as well as Chipotle as a company, to know all the operations of a restaurant enterprise in terms of what you do. Now, what I've come to learn also out of that is in Chipotle, they were also getting ready to advance the enterprise architecture to carve out a list of all the things that a restaurant does and all the ways in which restaurant enterprises operate. So the framework basically gave me the things I needed to say, here's all the things about how we think about what restaurants do from a corporate level down to a restaurant level. And then I can use that now, and have started using it, to say, now we understand and unify our language on what restaurants do using the framework. Things are a lot easier because, frankly, you know, I came in, and business and products and technology, it doesn't matter what Google Translator you use, it doesn't help those conversations. You need to have something very well defined. So I've used it as my Google Translator, but I've also implemented it now with a new process architecture tool for the company, which we've just started to invest our time into, and that helps us organize our processes into domains of what the company does aligned to the capability framework. So in the future, we can say, I need to know for this capability, how mature is this capability that we have to advance our strategy? What are the underlying processes that connect into that capability so I can test them for their health, for their relevance, for their value, and then also knit together what are the technologies that we need to have in place today to be better automated or to be safer or to be quicker to execute. So the capability framework is a language translator. It's a way to assess, because if you can assess your capabilities in terms of your strategy and then tie it back to your processes, those conversations for change, which is what I like to be in, should we do that thing? Should we take that approach? Are we too quick? Have we done our due diligence? Mm-hmm. The framework makes those conversations much easier.
Yes, and I think that is why Stephen Elinson is the one who championed this from the very beginning, this tool, exactly because of that. Yep. And Stephen, I'm going to steal your phrase. Stephen not only came up with smart systems, dumb pipes, I believe he also came up with your universal translator between IT and business and IT, right? And that's what this really is. So, Stephen, tell us a little bit about how this came into your sort of vision and how you took us down the road. And also, as you tell us that, if you don't mind, Abby's going to guide us through the framework as you direct her where to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you first and foremost to hear from Russell and your experience. Like my heart is literally over here just crying out in joy, because to understand how much business value and impact this has made for you is tremendous. So you think about just the outcome that Russell had shared. Imagine what it could do for you as an individual, and then imagine what it can do for us as an overall complete industry. And that's really the vision that we want to aspire to have everybody to take. And you think about what earlier panelists have said, right? Everybody desires interoperability and the ability to make these integrations into each other. It's not just the brands that want to be able to do this, it's also all of the suppliers. And if we all had this, think about how much faster we could all innovate and how much better the restaurant industry would be to be the place of choice where consumers get their food from. Because remember, they can always go to grocery, they can always go to convenience, they can go to other locations. And aspirationally, we would want them to always choose us in our industry. So the genesis, very similar to what Russell had described. I'm fortunate in my role at Amazon Web Services, or AWS, to be able to support a broad and deep selection of customers. And that means I get to get into some very interesting conversations with executives. And in one of those executive conversations, there was about this 10-minute period where two of the C-suite leaders were really going at it. It was quite heated. And I had this sense that just they weren't connecting and the conversation wasn't going anywhere. And so I kind of stopped and I asked the chief security officer, I said, when you keep referring to an MDM, which by the way, they speak in 3-letter acronyms, and we should just teach ourselves not to do that, right? We should always be talking about the capability we're trying to deliver. What do you mean when you say MDM? Because you just keep referencing MDM. And the chief information security officer said, well, we're talking about mobile device management solutions, right? And the chief data officer just started laughing, like chuckling. And I said, what? He's like, well, I've been talking about master data management for the last 10 minutes, right? So one was worried about securing the devices that were going to be deployed to the restaurants to do like employee training and such. And the other was worried about having the identity resolution to know the team members that were actually going to be using the devices and taking the training. And they were ultimately missing each other through the entire conversation. And that was the genesis for, like Russell, isn't there a capability framework where we could talk through what are the capabilities we want to have in our restaurants? Equally, I found it did not exist. I went and I looked and I was inspired by the ones that were in healthcare and the airline industries. So if you think about airlines, which is most adjacent to what we do, right? They're in the travel and hospitality industry. They have to be able to interoperate because they deal with government agencies, and they also have to cross-ticket. A customer's journey experience, you may start on a Delta flight, but then you might move on to a British Airways flight. They need that interoperability all the way across. And so we just started to create this framework, and the RTN was absolutely the right home for it. So what does the framework enable you to do? It breaks down those barriers between IT and the business. Some of the earlier conversation was awesome. We are all just specialists who are part of these teams trying to deliver critical business capabilities to our organizations. And that's really what it's all about. So as you're navigating through, like maybe, for example, you see all of the 13 different functional areas listed out in sort of the octagonal grids. If we click into maybe, what is it, market and deliver services and products? Market and sell products and services. Awesome. You can then start to see some of the critical capabilities that are listed along that menu in the middle. Maybe select digital marketing as a great example. And then from there, we give you some of the definitions, and we start to break down some of the associated business processes, and in some select areas, the tools that can be used in order to do those. So earlier today, we heard a reference to, like somebody said, a CDP, right? And we had to explain what a CDP is. Well, really what we should be doing is having that conversation around what are the capabilities that you're looking for, and then let us navigate up and down through this framework in order to better have that conversation. Now, this is just phase one, as Angela would tell you. We always aspire to do phase two, and of course, Robert and I would love to enroll each and every one of you to participate. But in the fullness of time, we would love to see maybe vendor solutions listed next to these capabilities that provide them. We would love to see a maturity index provided so that organizations can rate their own maturity and understand where they want to invest. This is a tool for an independent owner-operator, the same it is for the largest enterprises that exist on the universe. You just might need some of these capabilities at different paths along your restaurant journey. And so just quite honestly, thank you to bringing this to the RTN and for allowing us to develop this more and flourish and launch it with the whole industry today.
Right, and we couldn't do it without the contributors and the people that have been in the trenches, but also without the room today. So when we break off into our workshop, we'll dive into kind of how you may use this tool. What are the use cases around it? And then in a minute, I'll circle back with you, Russell, because we want to talk about kind of maybe what is phase two. As Stephen said, what do you see? How are you seeing a phase two? Let's sort of switch gears just for a minute. And Abby, if you want to keep cycling through this and just showing them a little bit more. There's also a demo of this, by the way, right out in the hallway. And you can go in and play with this tool yourself. And this is going to be launching, I believe it's December the 1st. Cody's in the room, he can correct me, but I think it's December 1st, we'll launch this to the industry full force, and it'll be live on our website. And everyone can grab it. We're also going to have a spreadsheet companion document that will go with it so that you can manipulate the data yourselves. And all of this stuff is really because of the work that the folks on the stage have done. So thank you all for contributing so thoughtfully to this process. Courtney, let's switch to you. Let's talk about another tool that RTN has created with your help. We've done a couple of different security best practices documentation and a cybersecurity operational document. Tell us a little bit about what you've created there, and that, by the way, that information is also available on the demo, the cybersecurity stuff that Courtney's going to review.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for having us up here. For this framework, I just want to touch on this for a second. I came from the restaurant industry, and it would have been so nice to have something like this. This is the first time that I've ever seen operators that are in the industry, the vendors that are supporting it, everybody kind of come together for these types of common causes. I haven't seen that really in the restaurant industry ever before the last couple of years of doing this. So having this tool available would have been amazing for me. I'm glad it's available now. And I think the important part of the adoption of it is that it's also going to adapt for each individual business. These are not point-in-time things. These are evolving as the industry and technology evolves. And I think that's kind of what the impetus of the security work that we did for both POS security best practices, but also just general restaurant operations security best practices, was that there was point-in-time requirements that everybody does every year, but they're normally around governance and risk or regulatory, think PCI or something else. Those are the cost of doing business. You have to do those inside of an organization, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're written in the most consumable way, or that they tell you, well, how do I do this the best way with the most efficiency and efficacy? And they're daunting. Security, specifically, technology budgets are all growing. Cybersecurity budgets are growing along with it, but not as much. So we have to be smart about where we make those investments and where we influence those to make those investments. So I think having something that's written by and for the restaurants to say, based on experience, because I'm a firm believer that we're only as smart as all the information around us, and not one of us has all of it. That based on the experience, based on the lessons learned, based on doing things the wrong way, and showing restaurant operators how to do things the right way, or the easiest way, or the best way for their business, because it changes by the different type of company or their culture. Having something like that available for both, we started on the POS side because it was the easiest one to latch in on, but then we quickly found there's a lot more to this. So it had to branch out into a whole nother set of standards. One's a standard, one's kind of a best practices. But having the common language, because us in cybersecurity, we definitely suffer from alphabet soup. There's so many acronyms, a SIM, an NGFW, a SAS, IaaS, all of these things. It's daunting, especially for somebody that's been in the restaurant industry. But if you're coming from another industry and just trying to learn the language, how do I speak the speak? How do I translate that now into what are the security risks inside of a restaurant? How do I account for all of the things that I never had to account for before? It goes beyond points and times of where we were just chasing compliance and regulatory before, to now, how do I do it the best way? How do I make a safer environment for my customers? And it's, again, it adapts, because the industry, our industry, cybersecurity, changes every day. And we wanted to make sure that we had a way to get that information out, to disseminate that to the masses. And this was one of the best ways I've seen to be able to do that. And that's been available for a while. Both of those have been available for a while now.
Right, and those are available on the restauranttechnologynetwork.com website. You can go to the technical documentation and get it all. If you're a restaurant, you can sign up for the RTN for free and access everything. And then our supplier partners support us in these initiatives, which we're grateful for. So thank you, Courtney. And Tim, let's move to you. Let's talk a little bit about a new tool that isn't quite out yet, but one that that we all feel actually, will map nicely into this framework, which is our restaurant technology KPIs.
Yes, so I'm very grateful to be here and have the opportunity to speak to you. The exciting thing about this framework is that it kind of organizes all of our thinking about the restaurant industry in kind of one place. The next question then is, how do you operationalize it? How do you take concrete actions against all these different capabilities, all these different parts of the business? And what we're trying to do with the KPI work group is basically define KPIs now, underlying KPIs in different aspects of the business. How do you know when your business is doing well, or is it doing better, or it could improve? We're in a very tough market context. There's a war going on, there's inflation, there's a labor shortage. It just means that there's a very narrow or narrower opportunity now to be successful from a profitability perspective. So we're looking at ways now to operationalize this framework, to be able to provide metrics, KPIs that allow us to understand, are we doing well, or are there areas to improve? So we've, over the past many months, we've identified 90 KPIs. So we have a list of about 90 KPIs that we think describe most of, if not all, of the aspects of the business. And then we've started an effort to start to organize them. It's too many for any particularly a new restaurant to basically manage. And so we started to organize them into essential KPIs for the life cycle of a restaurant. So a new emerging one-year-old, their desire is survival. They need to understand, what are the essential KPIs that I need to be tracking, cost of goods, whatever it may be, sales, and the like, prime cost. What are the essential KPIs that I need to be paying most attention to in order to survive that first year, the second year, and the like? Then beyond that, we have another category of KPIs that are really specific for just intervening and basically doing interventions and trying to understand and solve specific problems. And then we have a final category of KPIs that we look at as strategic. These are the ones that that are not normally used, but provide a competitive advantage. And so we're at a stage right now where we've had many months of first identifying these KPIs. We've already done the effort, of, at least a first cut anyways, of starting to organize these KPIs into these different groups. And the big invitation for you is to join us. What we want to do is really get as much restaurant feedback and insight into these as to say, are we on the right path? Are there other KPIs that we ought to be paying attention to? So I'll be running around here asking all of you, what KPIs do you pay attention to? What matters to you? What actually moves the needle? Which ones do you pay attention to and the like? And we want to make sure that when we release this tool, it's informed with all the restaurant executive insights that we have in this room and in the industry.
Yeah, and you can't leave the room unless you give Tim. Doors are
So,
locked.
so the KPIs that Tim is talking about is not released yet, but he does have a sneak peek of a spreadsheet somewhere on his, we probably all do, that we've been working on. I think everybody on this panel has also been working. And I'm remiss if I don't shout out to Christopher Siebes. Christopher, thank you for all of your support too, and the data and all the standardization. You've been amazing. We couldn't fit everybody on this stage that contributed to these efforts, but I think we're just going to sort of circle back on the Restaurant Technology Capabilities Framework very briefly, and then we're going to break off into our workshop because I know we're running on time. So Russell, why don't we just conclude with you telling a little bit about what you see for the next stage of this work?
Yeah, thanks, Angela. There are so many things you could do with a framework like this, but I think I would sum it up in 3 things mainly. One, you could use the capability framework to establish ways to inform change as part of your business architecture. So knowing that you have capabilities that are defined and are organizing your processes, you can start to use that information to inform how you want to affect outcomes from technology that are going to positively impact what your restaurants can do and how you can impact the experiences of the people serving your customers and also directly to your customers. If you could organize your business architecture to inform those conversations, the capability framework is so important for that. The second one is to use the framework to advance your technology architecture. When you have so many technologies in your restaurants and in your corporate locations, chances are you've got a lot of functional redundancy because you put in systems 2, 4, 10, maybe 15 years ago, and over time you get a lot of this redundancy creep because they all seem to have overlaps. When you assess those systems from a capability point of view, you can look across that portfolio of technology and say, show me where I'm redundant, show me where I'm accruing technical debt, and maybe we can't get 7 systems doing the same thing into one, but we might get it from 7 to 4. Or we might get it 7 to 2. These are things that help you advance the architecture. And the third thing I'd like to point out is that we are all in a business where we deal with third parties, right? So vendors, if we are, say, going to RFP to explore how can we describe the things we want in our RFP for a vendor, well, wouldn't it be nice to say, vendors, our RFP describes all these things, needs and wants and desires and mandatory and desirable, but we use the capability framework as our de facto source of reference on how we describe capabilities for you to understand it. And we would like our vendor partners to say, we also reference the same framework to translate it the same way, a bit more about translating things and understanding it the same. So those are the 3 I would say right off the bat. The KPIs, when we're advancing the business itself, you can think about things like capability maturity modeling. That's scoreable, right? You can say, we have a capability that is scored to this level. It's been weighted by these value scorecards, and we can put a number on that. And then we can say, how do we want to prioritize the gaps that those maturity assessments reflect based on the framework that they help define it? So lots of opportunity.
And it all fits together. I mean, your idea about speaking the same language with the RFPs is the same conversation we have about standardization.
Yeah.
Right? If we all can speak the same language, everything works seamlessly and more integrated together.